Well, hey, Todd Vincent here. Welcome back to Base Camp Wisdom. In this podcast, we're going to talk about some of the rough terrain that leaders walk through. And specifically, what we're going to do is talk about kind of the road from breakdown to breakthrough. And I'm excited to have a newfound friend here, Alan Nunnally, who is Director of Leadership at WindShape.
That's right.
For the WindShape Foundation. We met at a family wedding with my new wonderful in-laws. So, Alan, thanks for hopping on this conversation with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of your family, and I'm also thankful to be asked to be on this. So thanks for the invite.
Well, real quick, just for folks that are listening to this, tell us a little bit about you, your family, and what was the journey that led you to WindShape work in leadership?
Sure. Yeah. I'm not sure where to start that exactly, but I guess the easy place to start is my family. I'm married to a wonderful woman named Sarah, and she is a nurse by trade, but actually she's an artist and children's book illustrator, author by passion and career now. And so she's amazing. She's truly the vibrancy of our marriage. And so
Her book is at my grandson's house in his room.
yes,
So
well,
Ellie and
really
Evan gave that.
than me. So you should have invited her, not me. But yeah, and we have two kids. We have a 6-year-old and a newly turned 4-year-old. And so it's a busy, crazy household. We might have a child just like walk in the back any moment. So
Hey, that's life.
But yeah, that is life. So I'll give you the broad stroke of my journey and how I got to WindShape. It has a few twists and turns. And so I went to Auburn University, got a degree in business. I thought I'd always be in business. I love the mechanics of an organization, how things work together like that. I love studying leadership. But when I got out of college, I got into corporate marketing and I liked it. I was doing okay in it, and it was an entry level job. But yeah, it was my first kind of, I guess, entry into the workforce. And in that season, I was going deep in God's word with a couple of brothers in my life, and there was just a moment where together we were all like, if this is true, then what does that mean for our lives? Like, what should it mean for our lives? And we were asking hard questions around that. And in that season of my life, I felt like God was asking me the question, like, whose kingdom are you building? Is it mine or yours? And while I was a believer at that time, a lot of my ambitions or pursuits or goals, like my trajectory was very self-oriented. And so that honestly is like probably the biggest pivot that ever took place in my life. I was 23. I had no idea what I was doing.
But you're asking good questions at 23 because you're already talking about kingdom building as opposed to empire building, because I wasn't asking those questions at 23 years old.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I had the vocabulary for it then, but I knew something. And I would just, again, point to God in this. Like it was a Holy Spirit type of stirring that I didn't really have the language for, but there was this, like, I knew something had to change. And so I thought it was just a heart level. I never really imagined it actually impacting my career, but it did. And so I ended up, very long story short here, but I ended up on a one-way flight to Kampala, Uganda. I left my job in corporate marketing and I ended up moving to East Africa. Found myself way over my head. And then I'll fast forward in a very significant way. I got involved in child welfare work there, child protection work, was a part of starting and growing an organization for the next many years. Lived in Uganda a lot, but then I was also stateside because my tooling kind of like lended itself towards the administration side of things.
Okay.
My family and I then got into human trafficking, anti-human trafficking work. And so we actually moved to work among unreached people in the high Himalayas in Nepal, which is actually how I know your son-in-law.
Yeah.
And worked in the anti-trafficking space there and in poverty alleviation, like prevention of trafficking and health and education, and did that for the next 5 years. Then I got linked with Ep.20 campaign and took a job with them. And I oversaw their Asia operations out of Bangkok for many years and really, really loved that work. And so actually my family and I, to land the plane here, we just recently came back to the U.S. we actually landed in July last year or late June last year.
Okay.
So we're fresh, relatively fresh back in the United States, but my journey intersected with WindShape, and they were starting a new thing with WindShape leadership. And so they've hired me to come and shape and build this to what it will be. And that's still very to be determined, but it's an exciting road right now.
Well, what's your vision for that? Share with me a little bit about where you see that headed and what excites you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say so. It's a new thing for WindShape. WindShape has been developing leaders for a couple of decades. WindShape is founded by Truett and Jeanette Cathy, and so we have been working to take a lot of what was Chick-fil-A leadership development content and programs, and it was packaged, and then it was basically marketed and trained for anybody who wanted it. But the new entity that's taking place is actually we're no longer doing that for the marketplace or the secular audience. We're actually only now doing that for leaders of the church and leaders of Christian nonprofits. And
Wow,
so
that's
essentially,
exciting.
yeah, it is. It's a really fun journey. I'd call it equal parts exciting and overwhelming at the same time because it's just there's a lot to do and there's few of us. Thankfully, we have a wonderful team at WindShape, but so we are currently building out what that looks like. And so we really want to just engage leaders where they are on the real needs that they have in the ways that they want to be supported and engaged and
Yeah.
empowered. And so again, I can't speak a lot more into that, but that's the quick flyover of where we're going.
Well, and I like what you said, what do you need? Because just because I have a hammer doesn't mean that everyone needs a hammer.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes we just get really good at using a hammer and going, oh, wow, there's really some other tools that would be helpful. But you didn't
Truly.
ask me what I needed.
Surely. Our team is using the phrase listen, learn, lead, and we're trying to like really stay in that posture because I think sometimes the easy thing to do is getting in a room with a whiteboard and just like creating a master plan. And I love a whiteboard. I love an Excel spreadsheet. Like I enjoy that type of work. But if we did that without listening and learning the real needs of those we're trying to serve, I mean, I can speak by experience. It just doesn't go well, or it could go so much better if we actually craft it with those leaders at the center of the design table. So we're
Yeah.
trying to do that. We're trying different methods and practices to make sure we do that. But that's where we are right now.
Well, and that's really how this book came about, Mountains of My Mind, because I wish I could have been around people in my early 20s that were listening and had the life experience that could help me learn and give me some tools and some things in place that I didn't burn out in my 40s. In fact, what if we helped equip leaders that they didn't burn out at all? What if they had a longer runway and the return on that investment? I think it's so much greater when we live intergenerationally. And so we have those 20s and 30-year-old guys partnered up with guys in their 40s and 50s so they can show them a better way to climb. I mean, there's a lot of trails on a mountain, but they all don't lead to the summit. A lot of them lead you to places that you never had any business going. But my joke was, yeah, but I'm making really good time.
Right. Right. Yeah, and there's trails that have been blazed before. So it's like if there are
Yeah.
trails that go to the same place, like let's not reblaze trails just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Let's get to base camp and spend some time together and let me learn from you, from the research that you've done. Chick-fil-A's done pretty well on leadership development of their franchise owners and the people that work for them. So, man, what if you take that and then you make that available to folks that don't have the resources that certainly have the need? They don't just do things efficiently, they do them with excellence, and they take really good care of the people that work with them.
true that Jeanette, although I never have to meet them personally, they always just they want to see the kingdom impacted and also to be done in one way. And so we're trying to honor that legacy now.
Well, that's exciting. Jeremy Kubicek, who founded Giant Worldwide. I know you're familiar with
Mhm.
Giant and Five Voices and altitude training. I met Jeremy and he introduced me to some of these principles at 46. I wish that I would have been more engaged at 26, like I said earlier, but it's kind of like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago or today. And one of the things that he talks about, and I want to talk about today is the topic of self-preservation. I gave you some cliff notes from chapter 17 in the book and talking about the concept of self-preservation and self-awareness. I think for me, part of my background story, founding and operating a boys ranch, that I didn't utilize people and resources around me as much as I should. And I think living in the nonprofit and, kingdom minded world, a lot of times we take on self-sacrifice as a badge of honor. And I'll just do that myself because I don't want to burden somebody else. And I think what I realized is that I really just worked myself to death because I was carrying more than one person is ever intended or designed to carry. So when I share the word self-awareness or self-preservation, what thoughts come to mind for you?
Yeah. These topics are so good that they're being talked about, because I think the temptation is to not talk about these things, or not let these be things that are in our regular vocabulary. But I have found, if I'm being just raw and honest and transparent, which I don't mind to be, like we all have these things that we battle. And I think, and I'd even say this up front as a preface, is like, I don't proclaim or posture to be someone who's not trying to preserve self at times, or who's always self-aware. I'm not. I want to be, but I know. I mean, I could say a personal kind of storyline that I've found in my walk with Christ, really ever since the beginning and even to today, is I often feel over my head in the things He's called me to, or even who He's called me to be. And so a lot of times there's this, like, I feel like there's a gap that exists between, like, who I am today and who I want to be, God's called me to be, and what I'm called to do, and then what I'm capable of. And that gap, like, it can form into, like, what feels like inadequacy, and it can feel like a deficiency, and or like imposter syndrome. And I, again, like, I'll raise my hand first and say, like, yes, I feel those things. And I think a critical question is, like, what do we do with that? Because the more I talk about it, the more I hear others say, like, well, yeah, me too, I feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
That's
was
been
reading
my,
a book yesterday, but and it's Jamie Winship. I don't know if you read of any Jamie Winship stuff.
I haven't, but I know he
You
is.
got it? Okay.
I,
Well,
yeah,
he's talking about worldview, and he was somewhere where they asked everyone to introduce themselves, and they kind of went around the room almost like an AA meeting, and they talked about all the kind of the defeated or struggle qualities. And someone stopped, maybe it was even Jamie Winship stopped. He goes, "No, let's back up and let's all introduce ourselves the way that Jesus would introduce us to someone else in the room as if he was here with us." That was really convicting because I'm really good at knowing what my inadequacies are, my shortfalls, my limitations, the poverty mindset. But if I go into a room and I introduce you the way that God sees you and what your qualities are, the strengths that you are, I mean, that's a whole different conversation. But I don't do that very often. I don't necessarily, because it feels like like you're bragging or, you're overconfident. But when you describe your kids or you introduce your kids or your wife to someone, we don't bring
right.
out all the shortcomings. I mean, we sit and we talk about things that we are impressed with, the gifts and the talents and the natural abilities that they have. And so I think when we talk about self-preservation, like the three questions that Jeremy uses is, what are you afraid of? What are you trying to hide? Or what are you trying to prove? And then who are you trying to prove it to?
Right. Yeah.
And so if I will have those conversations with myself and I feel the anxiety kind of going up my neck and going down my arms, and I'm feeling like that imposter, which everyone else feels that as well. But, oh, what am I trying? Oh, I'm going to be in this group of other amazing leaders. I feel like I need to act like I've got all my stuff
Yeah.
together. I think just by saying that out loud, hey, I feel a little anxious. I feel a little inadequate.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference. If I just acknowledge that to myself, it doesn't have near as much control over me. If I go, oh yeah, I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm about to speak with this group, or we're about to get on and do this podcast, and I hope I don't sound stupid. I'm just like,
Right.
you know what? That's just human nature. But if we can live out of the natural gifts and abilities that we were created with, that God's given us, then man, we act, we lead, our language is so much different in those circles. So is there times that you've seen that? I mean, in younger days or even now as you're in the position of leadership and you're working with other people that, and I'm not taking my own medicine. I'm going to get in and we're going to talk and work through these things, but these are issues for me as much as the people on the other side of the table.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say so. Yes, true in younger leadership, but also still true today. I think it's a constant. I don't know if temptation is the right word, but I think it's a constant that just continues to surface in life. That we do need to battle against those questions that you just said, like, what am I trying to prove? What am I trying to protect or hide? Because I think those insecurities that we're talking about, like, they can just come to the surface, and whether they're true or not, they can really mess with us and really throw us off course.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, it comes out in all kinds of different ways that I think we see. I mean, like there can be walls you put up, or defensiveness, or control, or like perfectionism, possibly. Or I mean, sometimes a leader who is self-preserving can display as an excellent leader. So it's not always, it's not, it's kind of the opposite of what you think sometimes. So,
Yeah.
but
Could
I
be
think,
counterintuitive.
yeah, it can be counterintuitive. I mean, for me, I've often felt like, especially when it comes to like the task at hand or like the calling ahead, and I believe this is probably true of any Christian following God's leadership in their life. The things that we are led into are often too great for us. Like they're beyond what we have capacity for. And I think one thing I am starting to learn is there is so much truth in the scripture in Second Corinthians of his power is made perfect in my weakness. And that's still hard for me to grasp fully. So don't let me say I do. But I really believe wholeheartedly in like when I am weak and just true and authentic, then Christ's power is made perfect through that. And then empowers me to then be a part of what he is calling me to. It's constant though for me. I mean, it just has to be a daily reminder.
Well, and we can get sneaky, and I could be overeducated, and I can go, oh, this is a boundary. And going, no, you're really hiding behind your boundary because you don't want to get hurt, or you don't want to be found out. You don't want to look less than. And so you put up this wall, but really what's behind it is lack of self-awareness, that I'm operating from a fear-based mindset instead of allowing God to work through me. His work is made perfect in our weakness. If we don't need God to show up in a situation, then we've got the wrong person there, because I will take full credit whether I'm aware of it or not. Look what I did. And I agree with you. God, more likely than not, will put us, if we're in a leadership position, he'll put us in a position that we feel like, oh, wow, are you sure I'm the right one? Moses, hey, God, I don't speak real well. I stutter. And God, we don't have Riverside that takes away and cleans up my stuttering. And so I need your help. I need you to show up.
Yeah.
Has there been a place where you've seen God show up and do the thing that you were the most afraid of, and use that in a way that just blew your mind on how God showed up and worked, and you really realized, oh, this was all God, this wasn't Alan?
Trying to think of a specific example. I know that when we were in Nepal, again, in that season of my life, my wife and I were working in an organization that was seeking to advance the gospel to the ends of the earth, but do it through real physical means as well, with like meeting need, physical and spiritual need. And so, in that role, I was young and it was just over my head. I mean, honestly, I was working in the anti-trafficking space and like in the health space as well, in communities that were so remote. And when I mean remote, like we'd take a bus ride 10 hours, get off the bus, and we start walking 6 days one way just to get to these communities. So
Wow.
like extremely remote, where there's no cell coverage or very little cell coverage, and then no internet, stuff like that. So I just felt like there's no, like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I don't know how to like enhance education and help in these communities. Like, I don't know how to like actually operate in these ways. And so I think when I come away from thinking it's all up to me, and
Yeah.
then begin realizing that no, like that God's been working here long before I've ever come. He'll
Yeah.
continue long after I ever leave, and He's like prepared both the place and the people who He is calling to do it alongside us too. And so I'd call that. I mean, one of the greatest fruits of those years were just seeing like ordained, like what felt like very providential relationships that would just come into place. Of like, oh, I met a maternal health, like we have a maternal health expert who now wants to serve, and then there was a guy who just randomly got in contact with us about, he was a helicopter, gosh, what's the word, paramedic who'd be on flights. And he was like,
Hmm.
"Hey, I've always done this in the U.S. Like, can I do it over there?" And we're like, "Yeah, actually, we're doing that already. Like, come on over." So
Come on.
there's neat ways of like seeing God's
Yeah.
provision through like some ways that we couldn't have orchestrated ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I think the lack of self-awareness piece, and the lie that I believed in, that it was all up to me. I was on a 180-acre ranch out in rural Oklahoma. And some days, on my worst days, it felt just as remote as what you described. It was hours. You put the remote out there, and that cavalry wasn't coming. It was all up to me, and that's not true. I mean, God puts people together, and that's what I like about the five voices. As Jeremy walked with me through that, I realized that I got parts of all those in me, but there's two or three I'm fairly good at. There's one or two that are my gifts and ability in nature, but there's also two or three that I am not good at all.
Right.
And there's some that are blind spots that I'm not near as good at it as I think that I am. And I need to surround myself with people that balance me out, that can shore up the weak spots. So when we work together, we're carrying that load together. You know firsthand about the Sherpa metaphor there,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Really.
you use Sherpas. You can't Sherpa yourself up a mountain. And I say this all the time. You can't do that any more than a sheep can shepherd itself.
Right. Yeah.
And we go, oh, that's obvious when we want to use the shepherd and the sheep metaphor. But I think in our culture and as men, we think that, you know what, it's a badge of honor when it is all up to us and we just bootstrap it and hey, we'll figure it out and we'll get it done. But over the long haul, that's not sustainable.
Right. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Any
That's,
aha moment where you saw that, oh, wow, I have gotten to that in myself and I've got to have someone else's help here?
yeah. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. I'd say, so we lived in Thailand for many years, and I worked for Ep.21 campaign, which is a global anti-human trafficking organization. And those were also just hard days, or I'd say really, really good days, but also it was very hard and complex work. And so that was an element that I'd done some of it before, but when we were in Bangkok, it just got escalated to a new type of, I guess, evil that I knew it was there, but I'd never seen it face to face as much as we did there. And so it's also a complex work because human trafficking is often they say it's a crime hidden in plain sight. Like it can happen all around you and you don't know it's there. And so for me, sometimes I remember being in some of those areas where human trafficking was very prevalent, and even child abuse and sexual abuse was very, very common. And I think I had some sobering moments on those streets where we knew what was going on, but felt pretty powerless to do much, and for lots of reasons. But for those, I had just like honestly just conversations with the Lord over like one like come like please come soon because there's so much brokenness. Like I don't even really know what to do with it. Like when I see it or there's no place in my brain it can really be filed, if that makes sense, because it
Yeah.
is so broken and evil. And that sense like left me feeling very helpless. Honestly, it's like what are we going to do? We have some of the best resources, best programs in the world, and is it going to move the needle here? Honestly, those are just hard days and hard questions. And I think what it does for me in those moments were showing me who I am and what I'm capable of, what I'm not. So it's humbling in a way of like, well, I can't do it. And so it gets me to the end of myself. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So it is an accurate assessment, but then what
Yeah,
do I do with it after that?
it is. Right. Yeah. It's an accurate assessment because it's true. It's like, okay, well, I'm not capable enough myself. And I remember just being in a host one of those trips that same evening, just like pretty broken over a lot of it and asking and just praying to God, like, what should we do? And I remember kind of vividly just saying like, or thinking he was just sharing like, it's really it's the local church's job to be the avenue and the conduit for the life-saving, life-changing grace that will really transform a heart and then transform communities and so on. So anyways, for me, it was just a moment just to realize like how well like nonprofit work and the power of the local church really goes together well and should be always that way. And so again, it was an aha moment for me of like, yeah, we're not capable. Like we have to do this in community with other believers who are doing this extremely well, or just need other supports along the way. So to me,
You
that
got
was
to have
always just
community. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, and as you plug into community and you're pouring into folks as you tackle that issue, who are the people that were pouring into you while you were doing that? Did you have people in your life that was reciprocating that you were getting poured into as much as you were pouring out?
Yeah, it's a great call out because that I think is another temptation that lies out there for leaders like us who sit in these spaces is we're designed to serve, but we do a lot of outpouring and oftentimes don't pour in. And so again, I'll say I have not been near close to perfect on this by any means. However, there's been a man in my life who's just shepherded and discipled me for probably the last 16 years or so. We used to do weekly lunch when we lived in the same town every single Friday, rarely missed a Friday. And then we did it after I moved overseas with my family we had a call every single week. And it wasn't always a formal call, or rarely was formal, but more just checking in and ensuring that like, hey,
Yeah.
are we good? Are you good? And vice versa. And it just became this really sweet relationship. But then also I'd say one thing that's interesting about being in a foreign field type of role,
Hmm.
which is to kind of pivot a little bit here, is those relationships we formed overseas, they go a mile deep in a matter of a week
Yeah.
because it is a real dependency on each other that it's like if we don't have each other, we don't, it's sink or swim and we will sink and we
Yeah.
won't survive this.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty neat because although it wasn't like they were like pouring in, probably it wouldn't be the right exact term for that because it wasn't like they were shepherding us or like leading a battle, say that we happened to be in. It wasn't like that type of relationship, but it was more like, hey, I've got your back no matter what. Like
I'm
if
with
you're
you.
out,
I'm in it
yeah,
with you. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like if your kids need something like while you're away on a trip, or if like your wife's having a hard time, like or if you guys are your marriage is struggling, like that was just always the common you know vocabulary between those couples over there. It's like we got your backs no matter what. And like we barely even knew each other in terms of shared experience. And so it was pretty neat to have that. So I mean, that community aspect, I can't stress it enough. Like that's been what sustained me, I would say, outside of like God's grace or through God's grace, really, over these years, especially in hard places.
Is that going to come out in your vision for Wind Shape and how you share that in leadership development, is being in a position that you are vulnerable and that we don't have the God complex, that we do lean on each other and have some authenticity?
Yes, yes, yes. I hope and pray so. And that is the intent. We've had some internal conversations recently about this because we were in a conversation recently where somebody was sharing like the days of old, content used to be scarce and community used to be abundant, where, people would gather at a
Yeah.
church or gather around a speaker or a writer, and the community was always very strong. And then
Yeah.
now in the Western
Yeah.
church,
That is,
especially, it is completely flipped. I mean, it is content abundant and community scarce, which is interesting because especially with like the rise of social media over the last decade, and then now with the rise of AI, the projection is that that's only going to continue to amplify
yeah.
and
Information's everywhere. We're not short on information.
right. And so yes, I mean the intent at Windshape Leadership is there will be content. Like we want to have like sometimes we use the word like intentional growth. Like we want to have intentional growth through content or through an experience in some way or through relationships. But everything we design, we've kind of decided the center point, it has to be rich, vulnerable, authentic community where we can sit all across the table from each other and really maybe not even know each other that well, but let the guards down, let the defensive
Hmm.
walls down, and just say, yeah, like I often struggle with this, or I don't feel like I have what it takes, or and share the real things that we each feel because they're
Yeah.
all there. Like even in
Yeah.
the most highly capable leaders in the world, I still think those things most likely exist.
Yeah. And we can be around other people that are authentic. It relieves the pressure of perfection that I've got, the standard I've got in my mind that is so unobtainable and so unrealistic. I couldn't expect a 26-year-old to had any of that figured out when I first started the boys ranch. And so I would dominate myself with my goals. I would dominate myself in real high goals. And then I'd also dominate myself when I only achieved maybe, 75 to 85% of that. Well, gosh, that's a lot to celebrate. But, I'm banging myself up on the 15 or 20% of things that didn't happen like they were in my mind and how I'd hoped they would. And so as you talk, I think we have the same passion for leaders. How can we help pour into leaders so they can lead out of their identity? Because I think the self-preservation and self-awareness does go back to understanding who we are and not who I think you think I am or what I think you think I should be. But I think about Brennan Manning and think about, who God says I am. God is my Abba, as my father. He is patient. He is kind. He's gracious, and he walks with me at the pace that I am capable of going. How do you convey that on the front end? Just
Right.
to
Internally,
remind
right.
people to be realistic on expectations.
Yeah, this is good. This is welcome to my modern day prayer journal, actually.
Okay.
This is this is probably one of those that just I have a hard time with on a regular basis. And I even well, I'll get to that. But when you mentioned like goal oriented and kind of beating yourself over things, where that same self-imposed pressure often of like, it's up to me. I got to carry the weight. Mm, I'm sure you're probably familiar with Strengths Finder or the
Yeah.
Clifton Strengths.
Hmm.
So I have achievers in mind, belief is in mind, responsibility are in my top five, and sometimes
Yeah.
and those can be like really powerful, but also they can be so detrimental because at times like, it can cause me to like overstretch towards something that feels like a pioneering, something is super
Hmm.
exciting. I want to, it seems like a God dream and God vision. Let's go for it.
And
But
you can already
then,
see it like it's already there. I mean, you
yeah,
can envision it. It's easy to go ahead and kick this thing off.
yes, and so yeah, and that then can start to one like overstretch a team or myself even, where margins start to cut. We don't we don't put into the schedule the things that we know we need with terms of like in terms of rhythms and Sabbath and rest and or even our work schedule when it comes to like, hey, are we doing team check-ins in a right way? Are we having the right conversations? Are we asking the right questions? So I've actually so one thing, this is a real tangible practice. We have a small and growing team at the moment. And I've asked them to hold me accountable in terms of like how we set goals. Do we know our realistic timelines? And so, and I know you know the giant framework. So, like, I have a tendency to underestimate a timeline on something and overestimate the resources we have and the capacity we have to
Yeah.
do it,
Yeah.
which can really
Yeah.
lead us down a dangerous road at times. And so, I just told my team that, and I just said like, this is my tendency, and I'm
Hmm.
confessing it to you because
Yeah.
I want you to call it out when it comes up.
Yeah.
And that's been helpful. And occasionally they have. They said, actually, that's like we need to back off this or we need to slow down on this one or that one. And that's been a gift to our team.
Well, that's to know yourself to lead yourself. And so if I know this is a tendency and pattern and I ask you to hold me accountable to that, then you've also set the standard for them to do that as well. And you know what? We're not going to live in a culture that we're going to dominate each other on a budget or a project punch list. And if we do that, we do it at the expense of what? We do it at the expense of people and relationship and burnouts. You burn them out and you burn them up and they come back to the States and you try to retool and rebuild them and then send them back. The cost of that, the financial, the emotional, the spiritual cost, the defeat is, and people throw out the number, oh, it's 150%. I would say that it's even from a human capital, it's even greater than that. So, what if we
Yeah.
don't do that from the front end? What if we lead in a way that's healthy, realistic, and life-giving, not just to the project, but to the people that execute that project and that lead it well, so they
Yeah.
can live well
I agree.
past that project and that mission.
Yep.
I'm working on a project right now, and I've got a budget. And Jeannie goes, "Well, what if you spent the rest of the year just raising funds for that and you didn't start it till January? And all the goals that you have that are amazing, what if you divided that number by 4?"
Yep. Yeah. Right. I mean, that
That sounds like underachieving.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm convinced, I haven't developed this thought fully, but I'm convinced that one of the greatest issues with Christian nonprofits that I've been a part of is staff turnover. Because a lot of times when we are in visionary roles, we can be so mission focused that we forget the people who carry it out on a daily basis. And when we miss that, I feel like what tends to happen, or the trend I see happening, is you lose the people on the front line because they're not equipped and empowered to do their work, and then you lose both the people and the mission. But I think if leaders, or I'll say this to myself, if we focus on our teams that are carrying these things out and making sure they're healthy, they have everything they need, they're resourced, they're being developed as people, as leaders, they're being cared for, just as
Yeah.
humans, as like
Yeah.
we've been made in God's image, like they're just cared for. Then we actually keep the people and see them grow as contributors to whatever like God's called us to, and hit the mission. And so it's this bit of a paradox. I feel like that's going on. But yeah, but what you just said was right on point. I totally
Well,
agree.
and if you do it proactively, I wrote this book in this format. As I look back at it and do reverse engineering, it's a formation process. So, how do I take care of my mind, soul, and body, personally and professionally, and live out of the strengths that God created me to do? Well, I can give you 30 years of how not to do it and where I ended up with a breakdown. But after I saw that I can't do this on my own, that I need other people, I need resources, developing new patterns, experiencing rest, experiencing Sabbath, and that not just be a cool John Mark Comer thing to say, oh yeah, I've read his book, and well, yeah,
Yes.
but do you practice it? Well,
Right.
no, I don't practice it. I'm working 80 hours a week.
It comes down
But
to that.
if I start doing that, I got so much pushback from guys. Hey, you wrote 52 chapters here. I'm not going to read 52 chapters. I'm going, you can read 52 chapters because they're 4 pages
Right. Right.
and you've got
Yeah.
all week to read it.
Yeah.
And I want you to spend all week thinking about that concept and asking God what he's saying to you. I've given you my train wreck story. What's your train wreck story? What's your teachable moment? Where is God at work? And what does he want you to know in the situation that you're at? And if I do anything for 52 weeks, that's a
Yeah.
habit.
It's transformational. Yeah. It
That
really
starts
is.
being baked into my DNA and my lifestyle and my rhythm. And it really only took me 30 years of learning how not to do that. They're going, oh, wow, this is a lot more effective if I
Yeah.
slow down and I do the things that you said, and we do those proactively, and the people that we're leading. I did none of those things from this book my first 30 years. And so I joke, it's like going to the state fair. When you look at some of the eating habits and the choices people make, you go, oh, I feel a lot better about myself. And
Yeah.
that was Todd Benson for 30 years. I was told I was feverishly efficient. And then I realized that wasn't a compliment.
Yeah.
I go, oh, okay, there's a better way to live.
Yeah. There's a line you wrote in this in week 17 that I really resonated with. It says, "My overprotection and overcompensation led me to lose the very thing that I was trying to prevent."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like that. It resonated because something you said, the efficiency and like the mentality around like continue to drive, continue to push, and shape and
Mm-hmm.
build and all those things. They're often applauded sometimes
Yeah.
like by those around
Yeah.
us, and that can be very dangerous because what happens is, again, it's a bit of a paradox, is the things we try to overprotect or overcompensate for actually causes us to lose the very things that we care for
Yeah.
most. And I actually appreciated
Absolutely.
that. 'Cause I see that I see that in my life. But I mean, back to the John Mark Comer thing you mentioned earlier, it's like, do we as leaders, do we actually practice the things that we know? And I shouldn't even quote John Mark Comer, that we know, like God's word leads us to practice and integrate into
Yeah.
our lives.
Go back
And
to the
it's like,
same source that John Mark Comer went to. Yeah. What
right.
is
Yeah. Right.
the rhythms that Jesus practiced?
He's written it well, right? But I mean, it is
Yeah.
truly the rhythms of Jesus, and it's like,
Yeah.
if we just do those things and we don't get caught up in fruit and the outcomes and what we're building necessarily, then I mean, those things really are the secret to it all. It's like just staying
Yeah.
grounded.
Is there a rhythm that you practice now that maybe you didn't in your 20s and 30s that you've seen the benefit of that, and that's something that you share with other leaders that you're pouring into?
Yeah, there's a few, and my rhythms have evolved for sure. I have young children right now, so
Yeah.
my rhythms.
They look a little different than me in my 50s with adult children.
Yeah, yeah. So mine, I mean, my morning times are precious to me. And so if I don't beat my kids up, like, if they wake up before me, then it like throws my
Doesn't
day,
happen.
because
Yeah.
I have to have those like at least an hour in the morning where I'm just quiet and I'm able to read God's word, or I'm able to pray or do those things. I'd say one of spiritual discipline that has for me has been life changing is, I probably 15 years ago I started journaling my prayers. I just would like
Mm-hmm.
write them.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. Like, there's something powerful about it. Probably a couple of things. One, like my mind, even in prayer, just gets scattered. Like I'm just on some different, quickly, even as I'm praying, I get distracted by it. But when I have pen to paper, I'm not distracted, and it causes me to like really articulate my thoughts and not just, kind of
I agree.
carelessly pray. And for some reason, that has kept me just connected. I'd use that word, just connected throughout the years. Not all the time, but like it's been a really good discipline in my life that I'd say, yeah, I'm just really thankful for.
Well, and it's kind of dropping breadcrumbs along that trail too. So when you look back, you can see where God has worked and how he's answered those prayers. I was going back, I just started a new journal. And so before I started and dated the new one, I just went back over the last, 6 months on the last one, and the things that got me so worked up and stressed out. And I read them through the lens of today and going, oh, wow, look how God answered that prayer. And how I was so distraught in that one issue that I had even forgotten about it just in 6 months. And so by writing it down, I think it does do a lot. On it, we measure progress from where we've come. That's why you've got an odometer in your car. But for me, I spent so much of my life measuring it on the horizon and on my goals and my dreams, and those things keep moving. And so you can never achieve those because they get refined, they get pushed back. And so, yeah, we're on the treadmill, or like as a kid, we get on the escalator as a kid going the opposite direction. You can't ever get to the top. And that sounds silly, but metaphorically, that's what I was doing with myself. So I would agree with you writing that down. You said there was two. What was the other one?
Yeah, just the morning times in my
Morning
journaling. Those are the
and then
things. Yeah.
journaling.
Yeah.
That's good.
Recently though, I'd say I've had another one that just it's been interesting. Even in my like quiet times, they can even sometimes get clustered up with me being like goal oriented, or like I'll want to like really do a deep dive on a study, in this amount of time, and I have goals for it, which is kind of silly. I don't know. So lately, I bought a brand new Bible. Actually, my family got it to me for Father's Day this year, and it's just one that
Nice.
has no marks in it. I've never done anything in it before. And I just decided like I'm just gonna open it, and I'm not gonna be on my like I have a Bible app like Logos and all that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like I just want to simplify it and kind of bring it back to just God's word, and like let that be all I do. And
Yeah.
I've really been refreshed by that, and that's I'd call that a season. I'll probably bounce back and forth, but I just found like if I approach it in a rigid way, then it's just not as life giving as if I come in like allowing God to do what He wants and like allow me just to be in His presence for a moment before the day gets crazy.
That's really good. Jeremy Williams, a year or two ago, was just telling me about the single column Christian Standard Version Bible. And it just kind of the same thing. It's just one column, and I am not overstimulated with all the things on the sides. I just go
Yeah.
through, and my brain is less distracted to go through and just read it that way. And I've been doing the same thing. I've got whatever I'm reading. I'm up to about 116 Psalms right now, but I'll take a chunk at a time and I'll write out. I'll read it without my highlighter. Then I'll go back and just say, God, what are you saying here? And I'll highlight the things that jump out at me, and then I'll write it down, whatever those little chunks are. And then going, God, what do you want me to do with this? And so I've had 4 passes going really slow with a cup of coffee as I do that. And it slows me down to hear God and gives me a chance to respond and not just hop off and go to the next thing.
Yeah. And it's like sometimes the simple things are the best things. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to
Yeah.
be complicated.
Yeah. I'm really good at making it complicated and technical. And it's like, wow, just be still and know.
Yeah.
If I can sit with God that first cup of coffee and not do anything but just drink it and have my feet touch the grass, it does get you in a different headspace. And I feel like we can be more creative in how we think, how we operate, and we start operating from overflow and out of our true identity, not just having to just be high on production and output and efficiency.
Yeah. Truly. Yeah, that's good.
Well,
Well
kind of
said.
kind of wrapping this up, is there along those lines things that some hopes and dreams that you have for folks that come through your Wind Shape program?
I'd say like right now, this is all very much in formation. Like, so we're only
Okay.
about a year into the entity still, but so right now we're saying we really want leaders to learn to walk whole, lead well, and then create lasting impact. And really, what that translates to is like we want leaders to feel when they come through the programs we offer, we want them to feel connected to God alongside other believers who have similar challenges to them in life, and to really like find that wholeness, like that peace and that simplicity, like the single mindedness that He intends for us. So that's a big one. And the second is like just to be better leaders, like because a lot of times we weren't trained to be leaders over the things that we're currently leading,
Yeah.
and so we want to like really help that leadership be fully formed of like how to manage a team well and how to create a culture and how to deal with conflict and things like that. And then and the last piece is drive impact, and that's like operationally. I mean, that's something that I can get
Mm-hmm.
passionate about because
Well,
it just
that's one of
isn't.
your strengths, isn't it?
It's a love of
That
mine
piece.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, it's probably a muscle that developed because of weak muscles to begin with. Because
Yeah.
I've just learned, this is my personal testimony, but I see this from a lot of leaders around the faith space, is we are often like full of passion, full of conviction, selfless, sacrificial, ready to give it all up for the gospel. But at the same time, I see a lack, kind of a gap in between that and the impact we're called to have because of like a technical or an operational or a programmatic expertise or strategic expertise to actually like carry that out. And I think sometimes it feels daunting to think about that, but it's actually there's simple elements that have been tried and tested and proven that just can be plugged in almost. And so I just want to like ease the burden of leaders who feel like they've got a massive weight on their shoulders by just saying like it doesn't have to be that complicated. Like we can simplify this to a couple of tools, couple of frameworks, plug it into your organization, and they'll run themselves eventually. So those are the big pieces. Like we want to be whole, and then lead really well, and then be impactful in the things that they're called to.
So if there's a guy that's listening to this right now that is not whole, feeling overwhelmed and just feeling the opposite of what you just shared, is there one thing, a piece of encouragement or a tool just on the front end that you could share that would give them some hope?
Good question. Yeah, I think I think my only word would be like, this is gonna sound oversimplistic, but like, it's gonna be okay. Like there is grace for the season that you're in today. And God's not surprised by what you're facing, by what you're feeling, by the thoughts you've had, none of that. And so I feel like Prince of Peace is ready to meet us in all moments. We don't have
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
be good enough or be clean enough or be sinless enough to like have his grace guide us in the path ahead. And so allow him to meet you there. And then I think what's daunting is looking at step 100 and thinking like, or just like,
Yeah.
your imagery about the mountains. Like if you look at the summit, like it's just impossible to like, think about that. But
Yeah.
if it's just step one, like take that step, like call that person, like set that meeting, like get the help that you need or take those steps. And that'd be my only word.
Well, and that's the core process tool, calling it, what's my learning opportunity here? Calling it out to myself, what this is, what part in that do I need to own? That's the O. What part of this do I own? And then my response, what am I going to do? Well, that natural next step that you just mentioned is this. I am going to make that phone call. I am going to reach out to this person, and then to execute. Who do I know that cares about me, that knows me well, that I trust to hold me accountable? That you say, Alan, you told me you're going to do this, Todd. I'm gonna check in next week or end of the month and see how that goes. If anything I can do to help you on that, let me know. And so now I know that Alan is thinking about me. He's praying about me. He knows the situation, and he's going to follow up because he cares about me, not because he's going to guilt me or shame me or dominate me. And so once I learned that little tool, it really helped me govern and regulate myself because there was 4 simple things that I could articulate and think about. And that in itself really did help the anxiety, not feeling overwhelmed by whatever was up in front of me that kept me
Yeah.
up at night.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's
So,
good.
well, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about OneShape, how do they do that?
Yeah, sure. So, welcome to share my information if you want on this as well. But feel free to reach out. We have a website, winshapeleadership.org or winshape.org. It's also the whole foundation, but winshapeleadership.org is where we host a lot of our programs and offerings and events, things like that. I'm on LinkedIn too.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to connect anyway to any leader out there who wants to get more information or just find support or just want to meet a friend and an ally in the space. What a
And you've done a couple of leadership retreats with pastors here. Is that correct? I just saw
We
that on
do.
LinkedIn.
We do. We call them collectives, and so they're groups. They change by audience. So we have a lead pastor collective, an executive pastor collective, and then a nonprofit leader collective. And so the smallest is lead pastor because we really focus on the relational element with that one.
Mm-hmm.
The executive pastor is around 40 people who come to the property in Rome, Georgia. We have a beautiful retreat property. And then the nonprofit leader one's about 60 or so who come. And it's just it's a fun, very connecting time to both learn and build relationships. It's really unique. And so I'd say if anybody wants to join into that, you're very welcome to come. They're on the website, so please check that out.
Outstanding.
And it's be really blessed by it.
Well, I know you've been the beneficiary of that in your own
Yeah.
journey, and I have too. And so it's good to It's good to connect here and have some of these deeper conversations. And I appreciate you and the Sherpa work that you do to lead other people in the nonprofit world. I feel like you're reading my journal, a lot of the things that you shared today. So it's encouraging knowing there's other guys out there. And just, when I see someone that's doing that, hey, what are you doing that does work, or where have you struggled? And not be afraid to ask each other those things, because we play for the same team. And
Right.
that's the cool thing about Kingdom
Agree.
work, is that there's always opportunities to network and collaborate and help someone else be better in the circle and the community that God has them in.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, well said. Todd, thanks for having me on this. It's been fun talking.
Hey, have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of Base Camp Wisdom, where you hear stories from people who've done the hard miles and made it to the other side. If you want more tools and insights for your own personal leadership journey, head over to overlanderconsulting.com. I'm also excited to announce my new book on Amazon. It's called Mountains of My Mind, and it's a field guide for personal clarity, resilience, and sustainable rhythms. So keep on climbing, but remember, you weren't created to climb alone.